Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Not So Hardcore Gaming. Today is our first proper episode talking about a game, as last week's episode was just an introduction as to who I am and what I want to do and why. But today is actual game talk. The original plan was that we would be talking about God of War 4, and I would have a co-host who has actually written reviews on my blog on multiple occasions. However, things didn't quite line up, so unfortunately we won't be doing that this week, and we'll instead be doing it most likely next week, although things may change, so keep an eye out. But instead of that, I'm going to be talking about Middle-earth: Shadow of War. Now, this game is one that I wasn't actually going to get originally. However, this past month it was included on the PlayStation Plus, so I got it for free basically. And so I thought, well, I'll give it a go. It's something good to talk about on the podcast, and well, here we are. Now, I will say very quickly that I love this game. I have found that the gameplay is very intuitive. It's not overly easy, but not overly simple either. But obviously there's a lot more to talk about. So the graphics of this game, I think, are beautiful. There are a lot of really good landscapes. The cliffs are beautifully detailed. And obviously characters, they do seem very lifelike as you'd expect from an image. But the enemies as well, they have a beautiful level of variation. Every single enemy you verse is unique to some degree. So I think that had to have had a lot of work put into it, and that really makes the game more fun to play, because it shows that they actually did care about this project and they wanted to put all this extra work in so that you as the player can feel like you're not just doing the same thing over and over. The Wraith Design, so for the character with his ghost buddy, we'll say, he is designed that he fits and lines up with the character who is bonded with him, Talion, and it's really good to see how they vary between the two, and having that distinction seems to me like a really cool detail. Obviously, I haven't played the first game. Well, not necessarily obviously, but I haven't. And so I don't know the full story as to how it led to those two being bonded. But looking at it, you can sort of see that obviously they have to be connected in some way. And the way that the design has half of his face as the Wraith and half as Talion, the human, is really, well, again, just beautiful. Watching the gameplay itself, all the different attacks, it's beautifully blended between the Wraith and the human sides, both having unique attacks and unique graphics that come along with it. The attacks can vary wildly, and obviously gameplay changes for each skill you unlock, but each skill also has a sub skill which boosts that, and all of them look perfectly natural because of the work that has been put into them. So playing it is smooth and beautiful, and the graphics line up with that. In terms of story, I don't know the previous game's story, but this story is written so that you don't have to play the previous game to know everything that's happening in this game. It is a seemingly unique story where you don't have to go and play the old game to get certain things that are happening, which obviously it is understandable as to why one would create a sequel which connects to the first, but for those who haven't played the first, it can be a bit inconvenient for them to have to know everything that's happened. The fact that the story also has 3 different characters, each which will have their own storyline, is always a good thing, because not only is it more to play, but when you have a character who's a female over a male, the player is able to choose whichever character that they would most identify with. Because when you are playing a game, what you want is to be able to relate to that character on any level, because then it feels it's more like it is you that is that character than them, so you can connect to them on a different level. And I think the fact that they have actually created different storylines is always going to be a good thing. I have not actually played the other characters, so I don't know their story as well, and I actually haven't completed the full story yet, so I don't know how it ends yet. But I do know that so far the story is definitely exciting, has a lot of twists, a lot of new characters, and it is affected by the gameplay. And this is one thing which I find fascinating, is unlike a lot of games where if your character dies you just respawn to an earlier point so that according to the story you never die, this game actually has characters that kill you or whatever else react to you coming back to life. So according to the story, you could have died hundreds of times. You just can't be killed permanently. And I think that is one of the nicest touches I have found to any game, is it's almost like you're immortal, and it makes the game feel more real in a sense that, it's not just you have to do this to continue this story, and if you die, that's the end. And I have always loved that, and it's on some level, I guess, a fourth wall break, because they are registering that this character has died multiple times and can die, but that it can always come back. And I am a man who loves fourth wall breaks, so this, I think, adds to it greatly. The fact that from the start of the game that you, instead of just draining and controlling them like you do later in the game, when you use that ability on a character, it kills them, and how once you regain the ring, it actually changes how that entire section of the game is played, so that instead of just draining them, you control them and you can get them to fight for you. It changes the gameplay completely, because instead of just, if you're in a bad situation, you're gonna die, you can get an upper hand in the battle by bringing in one of your own enemies or converting one of the enemies that you're having trouble beating. It gives you a much better chance of surviving, as well as just gaining a new character in the story. And the fact that they have written in so many different personalities for each different orc is mind-boggling to me, because there has to be hundreds of character designs that will say certain things and play the combat in a different way, that they do seem like real characters, and that is a very hard thing to do, and absolutely amazes me nowadays that that can happen. And I think this game does it so right. The added fact that in the gameplay, certain captains which you dominate and take over can actually turn against you and betray you. I think that is, obviously it's frustrating when one of your minions betrays you. However, I think it is done quite well, because again, this makes them seem like real characters. You know, they have ulterior motives, they have certain personalities underneath, and even though I'm repeating myself greatly, I think it really just adds a whole new element to the game, that each character still seems unique even after you've controlled them. They still have their opinions and their ways in it, so you can never fully trust any character in this game, and it really does leave you guessing at all times. The side missions in the game, where you play as the Wraith, who was an ex-elf and now dead, and I cannot actually remember his name, so I apologize, but the way that intersects with the game, that you can go and complete one of those missions and practice whichever skill is associated with that mission, is done very well, because you get to see what his combat was like before he became merged with Talion, and it makes him seem more real. He speaks about what mission you're doing and says about how it went down, and therefore it seems less like this character is fake, because it shows his past. And that is a very important in any single game that you will play, is you have to be left with some impression that these characters could be real to an extent, because otherwise it's kind of just not fun. You realize, oh, this character has nothing outside in his life, so it's less fun. Because I like to be the type where I imagine that off in some alternate universe these things actually happened. I know it is weird, but I think it's a cool thing to think. And to have a game like this, it definitely feeds that side of me. The combat, I find, is quite similar to Assassin's Creed in some ways. The swordplay is quite similar in how you counteract and how your character moves. So I think that helped me get into the game a bit more, is it was still slightly familiar but completely unique. And this game actually does the stealth so much better, in my opinion, because you can do ranged combat. You have a bow and arrow, which are part of your skill set, and I obviously love stealth. Any game like that where you can pick enemies off from a long distance away is great fun and a great challenge, and obviously that's why I like sniper games and that sort of thing. But in this particular game, it is blended really brilliantly, so that you can do either level combat depending on what you like to do or how you want to challenge yourself. And having added things such as headshots do a lot more damage, or when you shoot them in the leg after you've unlocked a skill, it will freeze them. That really gives you so much more room to do whichever you want. And if you've got one of these captains that you're facing is a coward and tries to run away, you can freeze them to the spot. And so therefore you don't have to chase them all around the city to get them, because I think nobody likes just a wild goose chase trying to go after a character at any time, let alone in a game like this, having the gems that you can slot into equipment, it also means you can just further tweak your game. I am a man who loves some good old life still, so I like to have built up gems so that when I'm attacking the enemy, I can regenerate health. That type of thing is done. It's very subtle in terms of gameplay, but it gives even more freedom. Now, this game, I'm repeating a lot of the same sort of reasons to like it, but with any game, you want to be able to play it again more than once. And for this game in particular, you can go an all-out attack, you can go all-out experience, just out-level your opponents. Having those gems just change it a little bit enough that at any point in the gameplay you can change things so that you can play the game slightly differently and still enjoy it. Not just from the gems, but with the skills. Every single skill has other things which boost that skill or change how effective that skill is. So if you want to be just good at stealth, you can work on that. Or if you want to be just a warrior, purely and simply, you can then upgrade executions, that sort of thing, which gives you more room to alter your skill set. Now, as I have said earlier, the graphics in this game are really good, and now that I have actually spoken about that, I want to talk about the sound in this. Now, the battle sounds, for example, you can hear it change for what type of weapon your enemy is having. Like if they have a mace, the sound tweaks a little bit so you can actually hear that it's a heavier sword hitting a mace, that type of thing. And those little details are really good. The amount of voice actors that they have for characters is brilliant, and it brings each new character to life. It also has unique sounds for Caragors, the mounted cat wolf-like things. I don't know exactly what they are. As well as having some larger enemies, each with unique sounds and unique attacks which also have their own little sound. It really would take so long to design every individual sound for in any individual enemy, and I always love to truly appreciate the amount of work that has gone into a game. And for this game, just on the sound alone would have taken an exponential amount of work that when playing the game, I have to appreciate it. And I do. I really do. This game also has a multiplayer function. However, I personally cannot actually comment on the multiplayer aspect because, well, I live in the middle of nowhere and my Wi-Fi is not good, so I can't really play with other people much. However, it is worth mentioning that you can, for example, I know with orcs that you recruit, you can build them up and you can send them to Verse Online, and I think that is a nice detail, but again, I can't comment too much on that. I think I have mentioned pretty much every talking point I can think of for this game, and I know I'm talking about things out of order and just saying what comes to mind, but that's kind of what I want to do with this. With this podcast, I want to talk about it with no script, just a basic outline of topics to talk about, because I've just never been the type to have scripts. I like to talk naturally, let my mind wander to whatever I want to talk about and then just go from there. So you will find in this, there's lots of ums and ahs and cutting and just talking about one thing and then suddenly stopping and going to another. But, that's just how I talk. That's how I am. Now, to conclude this podcast episode, I will just say that simply, this game has very quickly risen to be one of my favorites that I've played. And obviously, I will have many different favorites because there are many different styles of games. But just to say it simply, I think this is a game that everyone should give a go, because trying new things, I think, is an important thing to do in general as a person. And even if you are more into racing games, I think it's good to try something new. And this is a game I think you will enjoy to a certain extent, no matter what you're into. So I do greatly recommend giving this a go. And yeah, I think that's about it to say about this game. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to my podcast. And I will be trying to release episodes every week. I have no hard plan for what I will be talking about next week. Hopefully it will be God of War 4. And I truly hope to have you listening again next week. This is Not So Hardcore Gaming. I'm Jeremy, signing off.